The reason that we sample is so that we can infer information about a larger population. The reason that that sample needs to be a random one is so that we can do that inference process without any bias. Now, does that mean that every random sample is perfect? No. And as an example, we're going to look at some examples from the Federalist Papers. Okay, we did this activity in class, and so now I'm going to use Fathom to look at it a little more closely and show you another point. I have all 130 words here, just like we did on the Inspire from the Federalist paper. And what I've done is I've taken a sample of size 5. So I've had the computer randomly choose 5 words from this, and the computer randomly chose to, as, of, and there. And notice that even though as is represented twice, it is 2 different times that it appears. So even though it was a random sample, 4 out of the 5 words that it picked were 2 letters, which means that my average word length here is going to be very small. In fact, it's only 2.6. Okay? We know that's probably not the average word length, but I can defend my process by saying I took a random sample. So, what could make this random sample better? You could say, oh, you could take another one and see what you get if you take another one. However, oftentimes when we're doing sampling in real-world scenarios, you only get one shot. Sampling can be expensive, and it's often funded by a company, and it requires a lot of time and effort, and so you usually only get one shot to collect your data. So, let's look at a different idea. Okay, this is size 5. We did size 10 in class. Let's look and see what size 20 produces. Okay, notice here in size 20, my word length is a lot more varied. I still do have a lot of 2-letter words and 3-letter words, but I also have quite a few larger words too, and we can look at our average length, and it actually is up to 4.25 now. This sample wasn't taken any differently than this sample, but the big difference is that because my sample size is larger, I have more of a chance for the bigger words and the smaller words to even themselves out. Here, with a sample size of 5, even if I only get 1 or 2 really small words, that's going to change my mean a lot. It's going to change my average word length a lot. So, long story short, larger sample sizes give better information. Larger sample sizes produce better information. And the larger your sample size, the better your data. Okay, that's an important thing to remember. The larger your sample size, the better your data. So let's talk a little bit more about what this inference thing is. What is inference? Inference is inferring information about a population. It's when I take my information I get from my sample and I say, what does this mean for the bigger picture? What does this mean for the question I was asked? It is the process of inferring. Okay? Every inference comes with what we call a margin of error. And the reason for that is every random sample is not going to be the same. For example, I can take another sample of size 5 from this population and I'm not going to necessarily get the same thing twice. Could I get the same thing twice? Yes. Am I going to every time? No. So if I sample more cases, notice now that my mean has changed to 3.8 because I've got some bigger words. And if I do another sample of size 5, This time my mean is 4.8 because I have several larger words. Okay, notice that my mean is changing every time because my words are changing every time because I'm not going to get the same 5 words out of 130 every time. Okay, so my mean may not be exactly what my sample mean says it is. And that's because we have to allow for a margin of error. That's okay. A margin of error is not a mistake. It is a measurement that compensates for variation from sample to sample. Okay, margin of error does not mean there's a mistake. And you've probably seen these margin of errors, even though you don't realize you've seen them, on your test scores. So like on TCAP, I think often it looks like this. Okay, so this, hopefully you remember I was saying, this would be your actual score. And this would be what they called a margin of error. Or this might be your percentile, and this would be a margin of error. Okay, whenever you see the little bars sticking out from a measurement, that means margin of error. And again, it doesn't mean that there was a mistake. All it means is that there is some variability in the results, and so this gives them a little wiggle room. This is what your score is showing to be. Theoretically, it could be from anywhere from here to here, and these are the margin of error. Okay, so let's talk about, once we've taken a sample and we've taken it correctly, what can go wrong? What can go wrong in sample surveys? One thing that can go wrong is undercoverage. Undercoverage is when groups are left out. When certain groups are left out. And what that might cause is some bias one way or another. Okay? You can't always help it. Sometimes undercoverage happens when you do a simple random sample. You saw that in our sample of size 5 a while ago because we undercovered the larger words because we got 4 two-letter words. We did it correctly. If you have groups and you're worried about your groups being left out, then the best way to do it is a stratified sample because then you can ensure that every group is represented. Okay? Another example of undercoverage might be if you are doing a telephone sample and you end up with, again, even though you randomly choose the phone numbers, if they're all cell phone numbers, you're leaving out a group of people who don't have cell phones. They all don't have cell phones for a reason, and there may be some other commonality between them that would affect the results of your survey. Okay, non-response. Non-response is when you ask someone and they choose not to respond. Okay, this is not the same thing as a voluntary response bias. In voluntary response, people choose to participate. They choose themselves for your survey. In non-response, you chose the person. You picked them because your random sample told you to. They chose not to respond. Okay? Again, non-response can also change the results. It might be because they couldn't be contacted. Maybe you're doing a phone survey and they never answered the phone. Okay? Maybe you're doing the phone survey and they hung up on you because they heard the word survey and they didn't like it. Non-response can also dramatically affect your response. There was a book published in 1988 by Cherie Height called Women in Love, A Cultural Revolution in Progress. She claimed in her book that 70% of women who have been married 5 years or more are having an affair. However, what it did not say in the book, though it said in the footnotes, Height's survey was sent to 100,000 women, but all of her conclusions were only based on the 4,500 women who responded. So she had 4,500 women out of 100,000 respond. Okay? How might that be different? She is missing 95,500 people. She's missing that many surveys. If she had that many surveys more, that 70% would probably be a lot lower. Because probably only the people who were having the affairs answered, or most of the people. Many women who weren't probably didn't answer, so this would probably be a lot lower of a percentage. Okay, the final type of bias, response bias. Response bias is when you have an incorrect response. The person you're asking the question to gives you an incorrect response. There could be several reasons for this. One, it may be incorrect because they're confused. If you say, have you been to the dentist in the last 6 months? They may say yes, but it may really have been 7 months. And they just think, oh, I've been to the dentist recently. Okay? So it may be incorrect because their memory is a little off. Okay? It also may be incorrect because they feel pressured to lie. Okay? If you're a girl and you walk up to a football player and say, I'm doing a survey, how many push-ups can you do? They might exaggerate the number a little bit to make themselves look better in front of you. Okay? So, or if you're doing a survey on whether or not you wash your hands after using the restroom. It is a social stigma to not wash your hands after using the restroom. Everyone expects everyone to wash their hands after using the restroom. So even if you didn't, people would probably lie and say they did because they know that they're expected to. Okay, AP tip time. For these 3 types of errors and the other 2 we talked about, the convenient sampling and the voluntary response survey. You do not have to know the name. You do not have to know undercoverage, non-response, response bias. Okay? You can just describe the error. And in fact, if you do the name without describing it, they're going to count off. Okay? So make sure you can describe the error. Undercoverage, when groups are left out. Non-response, describe the error. And just for reference, these 3 types of errors are called non-sampling errors because they occur after you have already picked your sample. These 2 errors are sampling errors because they occur when you are picking your sample. My data is bad because I used a bad sample. That's a sampling error. My data is bad because after I chose a sample randomly, some groups were left out, or people chose not to respond, or I had some response bias and people lied. Okay? Some other type of response bias can also be as a result of the order of the questions. You can lead people in a direction you want them to go with wording and question order. So there's a great example in your book about how college students were interviewed. They were surveyed. They were asked 2 questions. How happy are you with your life in general on a scale of 1 to 5? And how many dates have you had in the last month? People who were asked the are you happy question first were a lot happier, or had answers that said they were a lot happier than ones who were asked the dating question first. So by asking the dating question first, if people say, oh, I haven't had that many dates, then they answered lower on the happy scale. So question order and question wording both matter. Okay, it's the end of the notes. Pause the video, do the check your understanding, and then go back and check your answers. So, 1A. This is a sampling error because the error occurred while you were sampling. Just an FYI, a sampling frame, the people you can choose for your sample. Okay, that's what a sampling frame is. The people that are available for you to sample from. Okay, B, non-sampling error. Okay, this did not happen because of your sample. Instead, it happened because of the way the survey was administered. Okay, I chose the person randomly, but I can't contact them because they're not answering the phone. That's non-response and therefore is a non-sampling error. Okay, 1C is sampling. This has to do with how you choose your sample. Therefore, it's a sampling error. It's just a convenience. They just chose people who walked beside them. Okay. Number 2 is a question wording problem. What they are doing is they're making it sound like disposable diapers are not a problem in a landfill. So, since they're making it sound like disposable diapers are not a problem, fewer people will agree that we should ban them. Okay, then probably really believe it. So what this is going to do is it's going to underestimate the percent of people who think we should ban them and make it look like disposable diapers are not a problem.